Now, I once thought my wedding day would be the happiest day of my life, but in reality, it was the day I was completely destroyed. I stood in the middle of the aisle under the sparkling lights as everyone clapped and cheered. The music started playing, flowers were thrown everywhere, and no groom ever walked in. The MC looked around, nervously calling his name again. My mother fainted. Reporters started taking pictures. And I just stood there, wearing $100 million wedding dress, feeling like I was naked under hundreds of staring eyes. My phone buzzed. A message from him. Sorry, don't look for me. People started whispering. Some said he ran away with his ex. Others claimed he'd been arrested. But I remember one thing clearly. Someone in that crowd was recording everything and smiling. That night, the whole city knew me as the abandoned bride. But no one knew that just a few hours later, a stranger would show up, and my life would change forever. Want to know who that person was? Hit subscribe, because this story is only just beginning. People always ask me, why did you ever trust someone like him? I don't even know. Maybe because he was too perfect. He was gentle, caring, remembered every little detail about me. The first time we met, he said something that made my heart skip a beat. I never believed in fate until I saw you. Sounds cheesy, right? But back then, I believed it. Believed it enough to hand him my entire future. We were together for 2 years. He always talked about the wedding, the small house, the kids with my eyes. I never thought he could ever leave. He didn't smoke, didn't drink, didn't lie, or at least, that's what I thought. A week before the wedding, he started acting strange, taking mysterious phone calls at night, leaving the house without saying where he was going. When I asked, he just smiled and said, "It's a surprise for you." I foolishly thought it was a wedding gift. But who gives a surprise by disappearing in the middle of the ceremony? Or maybe he knew something I didn't. I started to wonder, was our love ever real or just a perfectly staged performance? And the person behind it all, was it really him? I don't really remember how I left the wedding. All I know is that when I came to, I was sitting alone on the sidewalk, my wedding dress covered in mud, mascara smeared all over my face. The rain started to fall. The wedding flowers were scattered by the wind. I looked like a failure the whole world had given up on. My phone kept buzzing. Notifications, messages, tabloids were posting headlines. Bride abandoned at $1,000 wedding. People I barely knew pretended to check in, but they were only curious to see how broken I was. I turned off my phone. I didn't want to hear or see anything anymore. And then he appeared, a complete stranger. No suit, no flowers, no empty words of comfort. Just a black umbrella and a deep, calm voice. No one deserves to get soaked in the rain on their own wedding day. I looked up. His face was wet from the rain, his eyes fixed on me, like he'd known me forever. He didn't ask questions, just handed me a cup of hot coffee. Among hundreds of pitying stares, he was the only one who didn't pity me. At that moment, I didn't know his name, didn't know where he came from, but something inside me whispered, this man didn't show up by accident. And from that moment on, my life was never the same again. Do you believe in fate? I didn't, not until I met him. After the failed wedding, I became the hottest topic on the internet. I was no longer the happy bride. I was the nation's punchline, buried under thousands of cruel comments. I lost my job. My friends avoided me. My family was so ashamed they wouldn't even leave the house. Everything I had turned to ashes overnight. I moved out. Rented a small damp room where every gust of wind creaked like loneliness itself. I thought that was how I'd spend the rest of my life, until he texted me. Are you okay? Just one simple message from the man who'd held the umbrella for me that day. I didn't understand why he cared, but his presence made me feel less invisible. He brought me food, helped me find temporary work, and quietly listened as I poured out all my bitterness. He didn't need to say much. He just showed up. Sometimes a stranger understands you more than the one who once swore to love you forever. Then one night he whispered, if you really want to know why he left, I can help. My heart pounded. He knew something no one had ever dared to mention. In that moment, I realized the wedding wasn't just a broken love story. It was the beginning of a much bigger secret. He told me he had a friend who once knew my ex-fiancé, and that this person knew what really happened on our wedding day. I didn't believe him right away, but the look in his eyes didn't belong to a liar. We went together to a cafe my ex used to visit often. The waitress there stared at me, silent for a long time, then finally whispered, "He hasn't been here since the night before the wedding." She handed me an old receipt. Scrawled across it was a single line: "If you're reading this, run." I froze. Run? From who? From what? He looked at me, his face suddenly dark. Then he pulled me out of the cafe and murmured, "There are people you don't want to go up against." That's when I realized he wasn't just some kind stranger. He knew every place my ex had ever been. He even knew his old passwords. When I asked how, he just gave that half smile and said, "Sometimes our pasts are more connected than you think." I didn't know if I should trust him, but the closer I got, the harder it became to control my heart. In the middle of all that chaos, his eyes somehow felt safe. But just when I started to believe in him, everything fell apart all over again. I once thought he was my savior, the one who pulled me out of the hell of humiliation. But it turned out he was the one who pushed me even deeper. It started when I accidentally saw an old photo on his phone, a picture of three people, him, me, and my ex-fiancé, standing together, smiling as if the world belonged to them. I froze. He quickly snatched the phone away, saying it was something from the past, but his eyes trembled. That's when I realized he didn't just know my ex. They had been close friends, maybe even more than that. I confronted him. He stayed silent. Then he said something that sent chills down my spine. "I didn't save you out of pity. I did it because I owed him." I asked what kind of debt. He didn't answer. He just handed me a faded envelope. Inside was a letter, written in handwriting I knew too well. It was my fiancé's. The last line read, "If I can't be with her, protect her for me, even if she ends up hating you." My hands shook. Rage burned through me. Another betrayal. The one person I trusted most had been lying to me all along. But somewhere deep inside, something whispered. He was hiding the truth for a reason that could change everything I thought I knew. I couldn't sleep for nights. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face, calm, steady, and built entirely on lies. I needed the truth, even if it destroyed everything I had left. I started investigating on my own. I traced receipts, messages, even deleted calls from my ex-fiancé's phone. One strange number kept showing up. When I looked it up, my heart nearly stopped. It belonged to the company where he worked. The stranger. The man who had accidentally appeared at my wedding. I went to the company's old headquarters. Everyone there looked terrified when I mentioned his name. One woman whispered, "Don't look for him anymore. He was a witness in a money laundering case. Your fiancé was involved." My whole body went cold. My fiancé, a criminal, and him, the man I trusted, was actually sent to protect me or watch me? I went home and confronted him. He didn't deny it. He only said, "I made a promise to him, but now things have gone too far." I stared at him, torn between wanting to believe and wanting to run. Because if what he said was true, then my ruined wedding wasn't about betrayal. It was about survival. Have you ever thought the one who abandoned you was the worst person alive? Maybe they were the only one trying to save you from a death already planned. That night, I faced him. No more tears, no more trust, only anger burning with every breath I took. "Why didn't you tell me the truth from the start?" He stayed silent, looking at me with eyes full of pain and exhaustion. "Because I wasn't allowed to. If you'd known sooner, you'd already be dead." Those words made my heart stop. He told me everything, that the wedding was canceled because my fiancé had received threats from a money laundering organization, that I was just a pawn, used to control him, and that he, the so-called stranger, was an undercover agent sent to watch over and protect me. I didn't believe it. I didn't want to believe it. He showed me photos, recordings, even the last letter from my fiancé, the one he'd hidden from me. "If you're reading this, it means I couldn't come back. I'm sorry for your pain, but I'd rather you hate me than see you dead." I broke down in tears, not because of loss, but because I finally understood. I was just a victim in a game built on lies. He took my hand gently and said, "You're free now. Leave everything behind before they come for you." But I didn't leave, because for the first time I wanted to fight back against the people who had destroyed my life. I saw blood, not in a movie, but real. Bright red, ice cold and haunting me to this day. After that confrontation, everything exploded. People were arrested, files were leaked, and I was left standing in the wreckage of two lives, one man who died because of me, and another who was still trying to pull me from the darkness. He, the stranger, was badly injured. Before the ambulance arrived, he grabbed my hand, his voice barely a whisper. "If you still love him, forget me. But if you want to live for real, start over without me." I screamed, but he only smiled, then closed his eyes. In that moment, I realized love isn't always about staying. Sometimes it's about letting go and still choosing to live. I stood between two choices. One was the past, full of memories, promises, and pain. The other was the empty present, but maybe a chance to begin again. I chose to stand up, not for anyone else, but for myself. I tore up the wedding invitation, slipped off the ring, and walked away. Every step hurt, but each one was proof that I was still alive. A year later, I wore a white dress again. But this time, there was no wedding music, no one waiting at the altar, just me and the mirror in front of me. I stared at my reflection for a long time. I was no longer the abandoned bride, no longer someone's puppet in their twisted game. I was a survivor. People ask me if I still believe in love. I smile. Love doesn't die. Sometimes it just has to walk through hell to become real. As I stepped out the door, I saw a bouquet of white flowers on the table. No name, just a small card, wishing you happiness, Kay. I don't know if he's still alive, but maybe a part of him is still watching over me. And if you're in pain right now, remember, every heartbreak leads to a new chapter. Don't forget to subscribe because my story isn't over yet.